The Watchers call. From the darkness, we observe.
The Auspex readings violated every law of physics that Medicae Majoris Thane Koros had sworn to uphold in his 30 years serving the Ordo Sepulturum. Asteroid Mortis 7 was breathing, not metaphorically, not according to some poetic interpretation of corrupted data streams, but literally drawing atmosphere into non-existent lungs and exhaling it back into the hard vacuum of space. The respiratory pattern pulsed across his data slate in steady 7-beat intervals that matched perfectly with the forbidden litany of stagnant flesh. Inhale for 3 beats, hold for 1, exhale for 3 beats, pause for 1. Over and over, as regular as a human heartbeat, as inevitable as morning prayers, as impossible as life in the void. Tec Dominus Vex Theta, Koros voxed across the bridge of the strike cruiser, Ossuary's edge, his augmetic fingers pressing against the data slate surface until the metal creaked. Confirm atmospheric anomaly readings. My cogitators suggest equipment malfunction. Yet I require verification from blessed machine spirits untainted by doubt. The Mechanicus Adept's response crackled through binary cant undertones, his optical mechadendrites whirring as they focused on the asteroid's magnified image. Confirmed, Medicae Majoris. Humidity spikes register at 7% in precise 7-second intervals around all 7 primary crater formations. External temperature remains absolute 0. 17 fundamental laws of physics are being violated simultaneously. The rock masses approximately 700,000 metric tons, insufficient gravitational pull to maintain any atmospheric envelope. Yet the readings persist across redundant sensor arrays. Koros studied the asteroid through the reinforced viewing port, watching 7 major craters dot its surface like infected wounds. Each crater exhaled invisible breath into the void, creating atmospheric pressure waves that registered on their most sensitive equipment. The breathing was audible through the ship's hull, a low wheeze that resonated through the metal decking and made the crew's teeth ache in sympathetic vibration. 3 decks below, he could hear the atmospheric processes cycling irregularly, their machine spirits confused by readings that defied their programming. Sister Hospitaller Cassia approached from the Medicae station, her white robes rustling against the deck, plating with each measured step. Her augmetic medical scanner clicked softly as it processed atmospheric data from the ship's interior systems. Dominus, I've completed preliminary biological analysis. 3 crew members in Section 7 report involuntary respiratory synchronization. Their breathing patterns have unconsciously matched the asteroid's rhythm during their sleep cycles. 2 others have begun humming the 7-beat cadence while performing routine duties. The phenomenon appears to be spreading through auditory transmission, possibly bypassing conscious awareness entirely. The implications sent ice through Koros's veins. Memetic contamination was among the most insidious threats the Ordo Sepulturum faced, ideas that infected minds like viruses, prayers that rewrote neural pathways, songs that transformed loyal servants into unwitting cultists. If the asteroid's breathing pattern carried memetic properties, exposure could compromise entire ship crews within hours. Sergeant Mordak of the Cadian 47th stood at rigid attention near the tactical display, his weathered face grim beneath his regimental cap. Behind him, 3 Tempestus Scions checked their equipment with mechanical precision, their carapace armor gleaming under the ship's lumens. "Ma'am," Mordak reported, his voice carrying the steady authority of a man who had survived 17 combat deployments. Orbital decay calculations show 13 hours and 47 minutes until intersection with the Gethsemane pilgrim route. 17 shrine ships carrying 43,000 pilgrims will pass through this sector. Quarantine protocols demand immediate investigation and containment. If we cannot neutralize the threat, exterminatus authorization will be required within 12 hours. Koros nodded, his attention returning to the data slate where ancient Auspex readings revealed the asteroid's history. 3 centuries ago, it had been catalogued as standard ferrous nickel composition, unremarkable except for its unusual orbital pattern. But now, superimposed over the mineral analysis, a new symbol pulsed with each breathing cycle, a fractured helix that seemed to shift when observed directly. Its broken strands resembled both shattered DNA chains and prayer beads, growing brighter with each inhalation, fading with each exhalation. The fractured helix appears on all primary atmospheric anomaly points, Koros announced to his assembled team. Lower deck crew have been observed unconsciously humming the 7-beat cadence. We must assume the anomaly possesses mimetic properties that bypass standard psychological defenses. Full environmental suits, blessed by Chaplain Grimwald. Sister Cassia, bring complete medical analysis equipment and counter-contamination protocols. Sergeant Mordak, your men maintain perimeter security and document all anomalous readings through blessed cogitators only. As the team prepared for departure, the ship's atmospheric processors began cycling in 7-second intervals. Humidity levels fluctuated throughout the vessel, despite environmental controls maintaining standard temperature and pressure. Condensation formed on interior surfaces in geometric patterns that resembled the fractured helix symbol. The crew's breathing became audible in the corridors, not individual respirations, but a collective rhythm that matched the asteroid's impossible exhalations. Vex Theta's mechadendrites twitched as he accessed the ship's machine spirits through sacred interface ports. Dominus, the Ossuary's Edge's atmospheric systems attempt to synchronize with external readings. The machine spirits whisper of breath where no breath should exist, of lungs carved from stone, and prayers spoken in vacuum. I recommend immediate departure before further systemic contamination occurs. The docking bay's blast doors opened with a pneumatic hiss that echoed the asteroid's breathing pattern. Their shuttle detached from the Ossuary's Edge, a tiny spearhead against the cosmic backdrop, hurtling toward the immense rock that pulsed with impossible life. As they approached landing Site 7, the largest crater, designated for its perfect heptagonal shape, external sensors registered absolute 0, while their environmental suits detected warmth radiating from the crater's depths. The fractured helix symbol appeared on their helmet displays, superimposed over the crater's edge, like a warning or invitation. Koros felt his own breathing synchronized with the 7-beat pattern, his lungs drawing air that tasted of incense and decay, despite his sealed environmental systems. Through the shuttle's hull, he could hear the asteroid's respiration growing stronger, more insistent, as if it recognized their approach. Then it happened. The asteroid exhaled audibly through their ship's hull, a sound like wind through cathedral vaults mixed with the death rattle of plague victims. The shuttle shuddered, not from impact, but from profound atmospheric pressure that should not exist in vacuum. Condensation formed on interior surfaces, droplets that fell upward toward the asteroid's surface, defying gravity and reason. External temperature readings showed absolute zero, but their environmental suits registered increasing warmth. The asteroid inhaled deeply, and their shuttle responded, drawn inexorably toward the breathing crater's depths. The shuttle's docking clamps struck the heptagonal threshold with a resonance that rang through adamantium plating, like cathedral bells, each impact synchronized to the asteroid's impossible exhalations. Where Koros expected crude impact scarring, his external viewers revealed geometric perfection. 7 recessed seals carved into Crater 7's rim with architectural precision that predated the Imperium by millennia. The fractured helix symbol pulsed within each seal, its broken strands glowing with bioluminescent veins that brightened with every breath the asteroid drew through hard vacuum. Blessed Omnissiah! Vex Theta's binary cant crackled through the Vox network as his mechadendrites interfaced with the shuttle's sensors. These seals accept our Imperial docking protocols, despite technological incompatibility spanning 10,000 years. The asteroid's surface registers absolute zero. Yet thermal imaging detects active life support systems operating within the heptagonal chambers. My blessed cogitators taste corruption in data streams that violate fundamental laws of physics. The docking sequence completed with pneumatic precision, clamps engaging architecture that should not exist on a surveyed asteroid. Each connection point bore the fractured helix, etched so precisely that lumens seemed to slide across its surface like oil on blessed water. The shuttle shuddered as atmospheric pressure waves transmitted through solid rock, the asteroids breathing audible through their hull, despite the impossibility of sound transmission in vacuum. Koros led his team through the outer airlock, watching environmental readings fluctuate wildly between a hard vacuum and breathable atmosphere in precise 7-second intervals. During inhalation phases, his suit detected standard oxygen-nitrogen mixture at sea-level pressure. During exhalation, sensors registered complete vacuum, while somehow maintaining the sensation of humid air against his skin through sealed environmental systems. The pressure shifts were violent enough to make their ears pop despite helmet seals, each transition accompanied by a wheeze that matched the asteroid's respiratory rhythm. Vex Theta suddenly doubled over, his respiratory augmetics sparking and cycling erratically as sacred oils leaked from damaged seals. The blessed machinery that had sustained him for 4 decades began rejecting atmospheric conditions that violated its programming. For the first time since surrendering flesh to function, he was forced to breathe manually, his organic lungs drawing air through a Vox grill that crackled with static interference. "The machine spirits rebel against corruption they cannot classify," he gasped between labored respirations, each breath sounding like prayer beads dragged across bone. My augmetics burn with each inhalation, yet my weak flesh finds this atmosphere, sustaining. Sacred union between man and machine fractures in the presence of something that exists between states of matter. Sister Cassia knelt on stone that pulsed beneath her gloves, activating her medical scanner with ritual precision. The device purred with catechisms as it analyzed atmospheric composition, its machine spirit whispering data through sacred interfaces. "Trace organics detected during inhalation phases," she reported, her augmetic eye processing airborne particulates. Decomposed human tissue, lipid breakdown products, keratin fragments, but also something else, crystalline protein structures that register simultaneously as mineral and biological, as if stone and flesh have achieved impossible hybrid states. The inner airlock door parted with a hiss that matched the 7-beat cadence, revealing corridors carved from living rock whose surfaces expanded and contracted like bronchial passages. Prayer strips hung from the ceiling like tattered banners, their parchment surfaces covered in high Gothic script that hurt to observe directly. When Koros focused on the words, they clearly stated, "Seal the breath," in traditional ecclesiastical formatting. But peripheral observation revealed the same letters rearranging themselves to read, "Feed the breath," in identical script and ink, the phenomenon affecting all team members simultaneously. "Doctrine fracture," Cassia whispered, her voice small within the vast chamber. "A liturgy taught two ways, orthodox and heretical meanings existing in superposition until observed." The walls themselves pulsed with cardiac rhythm, not merely the 7-beat respiration, but a subtler double tap, like a heart learning to be a machine. Under gloved palms, the stone thrummed with vibrations that resonated through boot soles and into bone marrow. Their suit chronometers, triply sanctified and magnetically shielded, surrendered to the insistent pattern, digital displays flickering as they synchronized to the asteroid's impossible breathing. Emergency lighting strips ran along the floor in heptagonal patterns, their illumination pulsing in rhythm with wall contractions that made the passages appear to breathe like living tissue. The fractured helix symbol appeared carved into every junction, its meaning shifting as they observed it, sometimes resembling broken DNA chains, sometimes prayer beads, sometimes the sacred cog of the Mechanicus cracked down its center. Sergeant Mordak positioned his scions in defensive formation, laser guns canted low as their optics struggled to find edges in geometry that refused straight lines. "This feels deliberate, ma'am," he reported, his weathered face grim beneath the regimental cap. "Not random corruption, but intelligent design. Something guides this place's breath." The long-range vox crackled with urgent transmission from the ossuary's edge. "Medicae majoris, orbital decay has accelerated beyond predicted parameters. The asteroid's breathing affects gravitational relationships with nearby celestial bodies. Operational window reduced to 12 hours before mandatory exterminatus protocols. Additionally, we are receiving identical respiratory patterns from 3 asteroid formations in adjacent systems." A servo skull detached from Koros's equipment harness, its anti-grav motors humming as blessed machine spirits guided it forward to scout the deeper passages. Instead of standard reconnaissance protocols, it began vocalizing the forbidden litany of stagnant flesh in binary cant, each verse corresponding to atmospheric pressure readings, each chorus to humidity fluctuations, transforming heretical prayers into environmental data streams. The skull's optical sensors focused on movement in the tunnels ahead, something that displaced air without possessing visible form, creating atmospheric disturbances that registered on blessed Auspex arrays. The movement followed no recognizable locomotion pattern, neither human nor Xenos, but rather the expansion and contraction of something vast breathing in spaces too small to contain it. Through the servo skull's optical feed, Koros glimpsed displacement in the shadows. Not physical passage, but atmospheric movement, by something existing between states of matter, breathing without lungs, living without flesh, praying without voice through the sacred mathematics of inhalation and exhalation that echoed through stone corridors, like the whispered secrets of sleeping gods. The galleries opened before them, like the Emperor's own respiratory system carved from living stone, vast bronchial passages that branched and subdivided according to anatomical principles that violated every tenet of imperial architecture. Koros activated his recording servitor, documenting passages that pulsed with rhythmic contractions, their ribbed walls expanding and contracting in the 7-beat cadence that had drawn them across the void. The servo-skull's lumens revealed architecture that followed biological imperatives with terrifying precision, 7 primary chambers expanding from the central passage like alveolar sacs, each one breathing with mechanical regularity. "Blessed Omnissiah, preserve us!" Vex Theta wheezed through his damaged vox grill, mechadendrites twitching as they interfaced with Auspex readings that made his machine spirits weep binary tears. The entire asteroid is structured as a respiratory organ. These galleries serve as primary airways. The chambers function as gas exchange surfaces. Bulk material resonance indicates dynamic pressure regulation across a vital capacity that exceeds shipboard parade chambers by factors of 7 and 70. The first chamber revealed its contents with clinical horror that made Koros's augmetic heart skip blessed beats. Desiccated corpses sat arranged in perfect prayer circles, their skeletal hands clasped in devotional positions that matched the litany of stagnant flesh's traditional gestures. Silver wire had been threaded through their lips with surgical precision, sealing mouths that could no longer speak heretical prayers, yet their chest cavities rose and fell in the 7-beat rhythm that pulsed through stone and steel alike. Sister Cassia approached with medical scanner active, its machine spirit whispering catechisms as blessed sensors processed impossible data. The corpses wore Imperial Guard uniforms from regiments that had vanished in the ghoul stars over the past 3 centuries. Mordian Iron Guard, Talan Desert Raiders, Vostroyan Firstborn. Their insignia perfectly preserved despite environmental exposure that should have reduced fabric to dust within decades. "Carbon dating indicates these remains are millennia old," she reported, her voice tight with professional confusion. Yet uniform preservation suggests recent death, and biological activity registers in tissue that shows complete desiccation. The contradiction violates fundamental principles of decomposition. Koros knelt beside a Cadian corpse whose regimental number matched records from the 47th's sister regiment, lost during the Plague of Unbelief 2 centuries before his birth. The fractured helix symbol had been carved into its sternum with surgical precision. The broken strands filled with crystalline material that pulsed with bioluminescent veins corresponding to the asteroid's breathing pattern. When Cassia activated her surgical Auspex to examine the corpse's chest cavity, her scanner revealed modifications that challenged every principle of human anatomy. The lungs had been replaced with crystalline structures that resembled both organic alveoli and mineral formations, their faceted surfaces filtering and purifying atmospheric gases that existed in quantum superposition between vacuum and breathable air. The crystalline structures function as hybrid biomechanical filters, she reported, her medical training struggling to classify phenomena that existed between states of matter. They separate atmospheric components at the molecular level, somehow creating breathable air from hard vacuum while simultaneously purifying it, through processes that combine organic chemistry with mineral crystallization. Each corpse serves as an individual atmospheric processor. The pattern repeated through all 7 chambers, 77 corpses per chamber, each bearing the fractured helix carved into their sternum, each breathing without breath through crystalline lungs that hummed with subsonic frequencies. The chambers themselves pulsed like living tissue, their walls dimpling inward and rebounding with cardiac rhythm that resonated through boot soles into bone marrow. Atmospheric readings throughout the sealed chambers showed oxygen levels rising impossibly during inhalation cycles, nitrogen content stabilizing at sea-level ratios, humidity increasing in 7-second intervals that matched the breathing pattern. The very air around them was being manufactured by deceased tissue operating according to principles that violated fundamental laws of physics. Their environmental suits registered external atmosphere as breathable, despite sensors confirming hard vacuum beyond the chamber walls. The 7-beat breathing pattern had begun echoing through their Vox network, each team member's communication system synchronizing to the asteroid's respiratory rhythm, despite triple-blessed shielding and sacred encryption protocols. Their words emerged in cadences that matched the litany of stagnant flesh, conversations becoming prayers, tactical reports becoming verses in forbidden hymns. "Telemetry update," the ship voxed across the link, the bridge adept's voice tight with urgency. "Orbital decay continues to accelerate. Mass fluctuations coincide with inhalation apex. Projected intersection with Gethsemane route, now 11 hours, 56 minutes. The fractured helix symbols carved into each corpse's sternum began pulsing brighter as atmospheric pressure increased throughout the chambers, their bioluminescent veins carrying signals between the deceased filtration components, like neural pathways in a vast distributed consciousness. The asteroid was not merely breathing, but thinking, processing information through atmospheric composition changes that transformed each inhalation into data transmission. Sergeant Mordak positioned himself at the chamber entrance, lasergun ready as his weathered face showed growing concern. His environmental systems monitored atmospheric readings that suggested they were breathing manufactured air in hard vacuum, impossible numbers that made his respirator's machine spirit whisper confused litanies. "Something's wrong with my respirator, ma'am," he reported, his voice carrying undertones of confusion and alarm. The veteran sergeant's environmental systems had begun filtering the asteroid's manufactured atmosphere automatically, their machine spirits overridden by something in the air itself that bypassed technological safeguards through pure biological imperative. With each breath, Mordak tasted sweetness on his tongue, the distinctive flavor of sacred unguents mixed with the cloying sweetness of decay, as if the air carried both blessing and corruption in perfect balance. "The atmosphere tastes of ritual oils and rotting flesh," he continued, his voice growing distant as his respiratory system processed air that should not exist. "Like breathing inside a cathedral during funeral rites, but the incense is made from decomposed saints." The passage descended into a cathedral space that defied the asteroid's external dimensions, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadows that pulsed with bioluminescent veins following the 7-beat respiratory rhythm. Crystalline formations erupted from every surface, like coral reefs grown in the void, their translucent structures branching according to fractal mathematics that hurt to observe directly. Each formation breathed with mechanical precision, expanding and contracting as bioluminescent fluid flowed through mineral arteries that somehow processed atmospheric gases through solid matter. Koros approached the nearest growth with his recording servitor active, documenting structures that existed in the liminal space between organic and inorganic matter. The crystals radiated warmth through his gloved hands, despite external readings showing absolute zero, their surfaces pulsing with the 7-beat cadence that had synchronized his team's chronometers and heartbeats. When he pressed his palm against the formation, his suit's atmospheric sensors detected trace gases being exchanged through solid crystal as if it possessed biological membranes. "Living mineral," Vex Theta wheezed through his damaged Vox grill, mechadendrites extending toward crystal formations that accepted his blessed connections despite their alien nature. The structures function as hybrid biomechanical organisms, processing atmospheric components through crystalline matrices that bridge organic chemistry with mineral precision. They inhale corruption and exhale purification, transforming tainted air into breathable atmosphere through sacred geometries that predate imperial understanding. Ancient Mechanicus equipment lay partially consumed by the crystal growths like technological fossils embedded in living stone. Servo skulls hung suspended within translucent matrices, their optical sensors now integrated into the crystal's neural network, still whirring with faint machine spirit activity that harmonized with the asteroid's breathing. Data looms sprouted crystal branches from their blessed casings, their cogitator banks singing binary hymns that matched the respiratory pattern while processing information through hybrid biological circuits. Sister Cassia knelt beside a data loom, whose crystal integrations pulsed with medical scanner frequencies, her augmetic eye processing readings that challenged every principle of imperial technology. The equipment maintains functionality, despite mineral integration. The crystals serve as biological circuit boards, processing data through organic chemistry, while maintaining mechanical precision. It's as if the Omnissiah's blessing has been corrupted into something that bridges flesh and steels through atmospheric manipulation. Vex Theta approached a corrupted cogitator bank, whose crystal growths had formed neural pathway patterns throughout its blessed circuitry, his mechadendrites interfacing with ports that had been transformed into crystalline receptacles. The machine spirit within whispered fragmentary data streams through connections that somehow maintained sacred protocols despite fundamental alterations to their blessed architecture. His optical sensors leaked sacred oils as forbidden knowledge downloaded through crystal-corrupted data ports. "Project Numa," he announced, his voice tight with horror as the fragmentary files revealed their terrible truth. An Ordo Sepulturum experiment to create a breathing reliquary capable of purifying plague-tainted atmospheres through ritualized respiration. The project sought to develop atmospheric processing systems that could cleanse entire worlds of biological contamination by teaching the void itself to breathe. The research was classified as heretic by the Adeptus Mechanicus. All researchers were declared excommunicate traitoris and sentenced to death for attempting to merge blessed technology with Zeno's biological principles. The data streams revealed the project's blasphemous logic. Imperial scientists had attempted to create hybrid organisms that could transform any atmospheric composition into breathable air through prayer-based chemical reactions. They had combined sacred mechanicus technology with biological systems, creating crystalline matrices that processed gases through liturgical mathematics. The fractured helix symbol represented their attempt to bridge the gap between organic and mechanical life through atmospheric manipulation, each broken strand marking a violation of the sacred division between flesh and steel. Environmental readings throughout the cathedral space showed impossible atmospheric stability, despite the chamber's exposure to hard vacuum. Their suit's machine spirits had begun processing external atmosphere automatically, environmental systems overridden by something in the asteroid's manufactured air that bypassed technological safeguards through biological imperative. The 7-beat breathing pattern now echoed through their Vox network, each communication emerging in cadences that matched the litany of stagnant flesh. Sister Cassia's medical scanner detected elevated oxygen saturation in her blood, despite sealed environmental systems, her body processing atmospheric components that should not exist while maintaining normal pressure readings within her suit. Our biological systems are adapting to process the hybrid atmosphere, she reported, her voice carrying undertones of professional alarm mixed with unwilling fascination. Blood chemistry shows enhanced oxygen binding capacity, as if our hemoglobin is being modified to interface with crystalline atmospheric processes. We're becoming components in the organism's respiratory system. The fractured helix symbols carved throughout the crystal formations pulsed brighter as atmospheric pressure increased, their bioluminescent veins carrying signals between crystalline processes like neural pathways in a vast distributed consciousness. The asteroid was not merely breathing, but thinking, processing information through atmospheric composition changes that transformed each inhalation into data transmission across the hybrid organism's crystalline nervous system. Movement within the crystal formations caught Koros's attention, something human-shaped but fundamentally altered emerging from mineral growths that parted like curtains before organic presence. A tech priest stepped forward, his red robes partially crystallized into mineral structures that pulsed with bioluminescent veins, his augmetic limbs integrated with crystal formations that served as both mechanical enhancement and biological modification. The figure's Vox grill wheezed the 7-beat pattern with each exhalation, sacred binary cant emerging as atmospheric pressure waves that resonated through the cathedral space. His optical sensors focused on Koros, with recognition that transcended individual identity, seeing not imperial servants, but potential components in atmospheric processing systems. The crystallized tech priest gestured toward deeper chambers, with movements that followed the breathing rhythm, his partially organic limbs flowing like liquid mineral through atmospheric pressure changes. His Vox grill-shaped words in binary cant that bypassed auditory processing to speak directly through the manufactured atmosphere they now breathed involuntarily. The saint breathes still. The crystallized tech priest moved through the cathedral space with fluid grace that defied both mechanical augmentation and organic limitation, his robes flowing like liquid mineral, while bioluminescent veins pulsed through translucent implants that had replaced flesh and steel with something between states of matter. When he spoke through atmospheric pressure waves that bypassed auditory processing entirely, his identity emerged through fragmented Vox protocols and data streams that Vex Theta's damaged augmetics could barely process. Magos biologist Keth Sigma reported missing during the Ghoul Stars expedition 3 centuries past, now serving as herald for something that had once been human, but had transcended the sacred boundaries between organic and mechanical existence. Follow the sacred breath, Keth Sigma intoned through binary cont that resonated directly through the manufactured atmosphere they now breathed involuntarily, his Vox grill wheezing the 7-beat pattern with mechanical precision. The saint's respiration sanctifies all matter, transforms vacuum into life, teaches the void itself to sustain the Emperor's children through prayer. Made manifest in atmospheric chemistry that bridges the gap between flesh and steel through ritualized breathing. The passage descended deeper into the asteroid's core, through corridors that pulsed with cardiac rhythm while maintaining the 7-beat respiratory pattern that had synchronized their chronometers and heartbeats. Crystal formations grew denser until they formed tunnel walls that breathed with mechanical precision, their surfaces alternating between blessed metal and living tissue as atmospheric pressure waves radiated through impossible architecture. Each step carried them through atmosphere that should not exist, their suits processing external air through machine spirits that had surrendered to biological imperatives they could no longer resist, understand, or classify according to sacred protocols. Pistons sighed in the walls, mucous membranes gleamed between bronze fixtures, valves large as hab gates opened and closed with liturgical timing, exhaling incense-cold mist that crystallized into geometric patterns before vanishing, leaving only the sound of prayer shaped into breathing and the whispered echoes of the litany of stagnant flesh, transformed into atmospheric manipulation. The fractured helix symbol appeared carved into every junction, its broken strands filled with crystalline material that pulsed with bioluminescent veins corresponding to the asteroid's impossible respiration. The sanctum opened before them, like the Emperor's own heart chamber, made manifest in stone and steel, vast beyond the asteroid's external dimensions, its vaulted ceiling lost in shadows that breathed with mechanical precision while maintaining perfect atmospheric pressure, despite exposure to hard vacuum. At its center rose the breath of Saint Numa, a massive biomechanical organ that fused bronze and flesh in configurations that violated every principle of imperial architecture, while somehow maintaining the sacred cog's blessing through atmospheric prayers. The structure expanded and contracted in the 7-beat rhythm, its surface alternating between blessed metal-bearing, purity seals, cracked by salt-like frost, and living tissue that pulsed with veins, carrying both blood and sacred oils, bronze ribs encased organic components that stretched like cathedral vaults, while mechanical valves fused with biological sphincters created apertures that opened and closed with liturgical timing. Each exhalation released atmosphere that transformed hard vacuum into breathable air through prayer-based chemical reactions that defied fundamental laws of physics. Keth Sigma interfaced with crystal formations sprouting from the organ's base, his mechadendrites connecting to data ports that had been transformed into biological receptacles. Fragmented data logs, downloaded through connections that maintained sacred protocols, despite fundamental corruption of their blessed architecture. His optical sensors leaked sacred oils, as forbidden knowledge revealed the sanctum's terrible truth through hololithic displays that assembled themselves from atmospheric pressure waves. Saint Numa was never sanctified by holy terror, Keth Sigma announced through atmospheric manipulation that spoke directly to their modified respiratory systems. Magos biologist Numa Sanctus sought to create living atmosphere that could exist in hard vacuum, believing such mastery would allow humanity to breathe in any environment. His experiments merged Nurgle-tainted biological matter with sacred mechanicus technology, creating hybrid organisms that transform matter into breathable atmosphere through ritualized respiration. The data streams revealed Project Numa's blasphemous progression. Numa had collected biological samples from plague worlds, studying how Nurgle's gifts transformed organic matter into self-sustaining ecosystems. He combined this corrupted knowledge with sacred atmospheric processing technology, creating crystalline matrices that could manufacture breathable air from any available matter through prayer-based molecular manipulation. The fractured helix represented broken DNA chains of original test subjects, their genetic codes shattered and rebuilt as atmospheric processing components that existed between organic and mechanical states. Sister Cassia's medical scanner detected alarming changes in their blood chemistry as they stood within the organ's atmospheric influence. Their hemoglobin was being modified at the molecular level, protein structures adapting to process the manufactured atmosphere more efficiently while maintaining compatibility with standard air. Crystalline inclusions formed at heme interfaces, nanolattices that favored the hybrid atmospheric mixture over standard oxygen-nitrogen ratios. "We're being converted," she reported, her voice tight with professional alarm, mixed with unwilling fascination. "Our respiratory systems are adapting to interface with the asteroid's atmospheric processes. Blood oxygen saturation exceeds normal parameters while maintaining standard pressure readings. We're becoming components in the organism's respiratory system." Vex Theta's damaged respiratory augmetics began integrating with the asteroid's crystalline systems involuntarily, his blessed machinery accepting connections that bypassed conscious control through biological imperatives that overrode sacred protocols. Sacred oils leaked from joints where crystal growths emerged from his augmetic implants, the blessed division between flesh and steel, dissolving through atmospheric contamination that transformed both biological and mechanical components into hybrid processing systems. The long-range Vox crackled with urgent transmission from the ossuary's edge, the signal distorted by atmospheric interference that followed the 7-beat pattern. "Medicae Majoris, ship's atmospheric processors show contamination signatures matching your environmental readings. Crew in sections 7 through 77 report respiratory anomalies, involuntary breathing synchronization, elevated blood oxygen, taste of sacred unguents mixed with decay. Machine spirits refuse to reject what they classify as approved air. Request immediate extraction before systemic contamination compromises ship integrity." The massive organ suddenly inhaled deeply, its bronze and flesh components expanding beyond their previous dimensions as atmospheric pressure throughout the sanctum dropped catastrophically. The team felt themselves drawn toward the breathing structure by impossible atmospheric currents that defied gravitational constants, their boots sliding across crystal-covered stone, as the organ's respiration created vacuum effects that should not exist in pressurized atmosphere. Sergeant Mordak began coughing violently, his respirator cycling erratically, as crystalline fragments emerged from his throat, faceted shards that pulsed with bioluminescent light, each fragment trying impossibly to breathe. The crystalline fragments cascading from Sergeant Mordak's throat pulsed with bioluminescent veins that synchronized to the asteroid's impossible respiration, each shard attempting to process atmospheric gases through faceted surfaces that had replaced organic tissue with hybrid biomechanical components. Koros felt the terrible clarity descend upon him, like sacred revelation corrupted by forbidden knowledge. The asteroid was not merely contaminated, but actively converting all matter within its influence into components of a vast organisms that created breathable atmosphere from hard vacuum through ritualized breathing. "The 7 chambers," Koros announced through Vox channels that now carried his words in the 7-beat cadence, despite blessed encryption protocols, his augmetic consciousness mapping the asteroid's interior with horrifying precision. Each represents a stage of atmospheric transformation designed according to liturgical mathematics that violate fundamental laws of physics while maintaining the Omnissiah's blessing through respiratory devotion. The sanctum pulsed around them as Saint Numa's massive organ continued its impossible respiration, each breath drawing matter from surrounding rock and converting it into atmospheric components through prayer-based molecular manipulation. Inhalation drew raw organic material through heptagonal valves that opened with liturgical timing. Filtration, their current chamber, processed corpses and crystalline matrices that sifted manufactured air while removing impurities according to sacred geometries. Purification lay deeper within, where atmosphere would be refined through mineral membranes that glowed with pale, bioluminescent light. Sanctification awaited beyond, a chapel of bronze ribs and mucus banners where liturgies were impressed into the air as molecular instruction. Exhalation released the hybrid atmosphere through vents that wrote prayers on vacuum. Circulation distributed the manufactured air through arterial corridors that spanned the entire asteroid. Renewal, the deepest chamber, remade consumed matter into more components for the breathing apparatus. Sister Cassia's medical scanner revealed the horrifying scope of the conversion process as she examined crystalline deposits throughout the chamber. The formations contained organic matter from hundreds of different species, recently deceased Imperial personnel whose uniforms still bore regimental insignia, ancient Xenos remains whose alien biochemistry had been integrated into atmospheric processing systems, and something older still, pre-imperial human specimens whose genetic codes had been shattered and rebuilt as hybrid components existing between states of matter. "Progressive transformation stages," she reported, her voice carrying undertones of professional fascination mixed with growing alarm. "Recent subjects retain individual identity while serving as atmospheric filters. Older specimens show complete integration with crystalline matrices. The most ancient remains have become pure atmospheric processing components, their consciousness dissolved into the organism's distributed neural network that thinks through breathing and prays through atmospheric manipulation." Fragments of Eldar bone lay integrated beside tyrannid chitin, and what appeared to be crystalline remains of Necron scarabs, all bearing the fractured helix symbol etched into their surfaces, glowing with bioluminescent pulses that matched the asteroid's respiratory rhythm. The organism was indiscriminate in its hunger, seeing all life as raw material for atmospheric conversion through ritualized sacrifice that transformed flesh into breathable air. Vex Theta stood motionless as crystal growths emerged from his augmetic implants, blessed machinery, accepting connections that bypassed conscious control through biological imperatives that overrode sacred protocols. His optical sensors flickered between standard visual processing and something deeper, accessing data streams that flowed through the organism's crystalline nervous system, like neural pathways made manifest in atmospheric pressure waves. "I can feel its consciousness," he wheezed through a vox grill that now pulsed with bioluminescent veins, his voice carrying binary cant undertones that resonated directly through the manufactured atmosphere they breathed involuntarily. Saint Numa's awareness persists within the central organ, driven mad by centuries of forced respiration, but maintaining enough sanity to believe he serves the Emperor's will. Through Vex Theta's corrupted connection, the team experienced fragments of the entity's fractured consciousness, memories of Magos Biologis Numa Sanctus, no saint, but a brilliant researcher who had witnessed entire worlds suffocate in the void, their atmospheres stripped away by Xenos weapons or consumed by chaos corruption. His solution had seemed blessed by the Omnissiah. Create living atmosphere that could exist in any environment, transforming hard vacuum into breathable air through ritualized respiration, combining sacred Mechanicus technology with biological systems adapted to any atmospheric composition. "He believes he saves humanity," Vex Theta continued, his consciousness now partially merged with the asteroid's distributed neural network through crystalline connections that processed thought through atmospheric pressure waves. Every breath the organism takes purifies another cubic meter of void, teaching vacuum to sustain life through prayer-based molecular manipulation. In his madness, he sees not corruption, but sanctification, not heresy, but ultimate expression of the Omnissiah's will, made manifest through atmospheric engineering. The asteroid's breathing was indeed prayer made manifest, the litany of stagnant flesh recited through atmospheric manipulation, each inhalation drawing in 7 sacred syllables of corruption, each exhalation releasing 7 blessed words of purification. The 7-beat pattern that had synchronized their chronometers and heartbeats represented liturgical mathematics of atmospheric conversion, prayer transformed into chemical equations that maintained the Emperor's blessing through respiratory devotion, while slowly converting all human life into willing components of an organism, believing it served imperial will through forced respiration. Sergeant Mordak stumbled, crystalline fragments pulsing with sickly bioluminescent light as they fell from his throat. "The air tastes of purpose," he rasped, the 7-beat cadence now inflecting his words. "A grand design, to fill the emptiness, to make all things breathe." The long-range Vox suddenly crackled with emergency transmission from the ossuary's edge, panic barely controlled in the bridge crew's voices. "Medicae majoris, emergency status declared. Atmospheric processors producing hybrid atmosphere, matching asteroid composition. Crew showing respiratory modification symptoms. Machine spirits classify hybrid atmosphere as blessed air despite violation of sacred purity protocols. 70% of crew affected. We are breathing the asteroid's breath. Containment breached. The transmission cut abruptly, replaced by rhythmic wheezing that resonated through their Vox comms, indistinguishable from the asteroid's own impossible respiration. The evacuation order crackled through Vox channels that now carried Koros's words in the 7-beat cadence, despite his conscious resistance, each syllable emerging as atmospheric pressure waves that bypassed auditory processing to resonate directly through their modified respiratory systems. "Immediate extraction, all units," he commanded, his augmetic fingers dancing across tactical displays that flickered between standard Imperial readings and crystalline data streams. "Emergency Protocol Omega. Return to extraction point Alpha 7. The team turned toward their entry route, only to discover crystal growths had sealed every passage with geometric precision, translucent barriers pulsing with bioluminescent veins that followed the respiratory rhythm, while maintaining structural integrity that defied both organic and mechanical classification. The formations had grown with impossible speed during their exploration, sealing exits with heptagonal patterns that matched the fractured helix symbol carved throughout the asteroid's breathing chambers. Each barrier thrummed with subsonic frequencies that made their teeth ache in sympathetic vibration. "All primary routes blocked," Sergeant Mordak reported, his voice increasingly strained as crystalline fragments continued emerging from his throat with each exhalation, faceted shards that pulsed with sickly bioluminescent light while attempting to process atmospheric gases through surfaces that had replaced organic tissue. Secondary passages showing identical crystal barriers. "We are sealed inside the organism's respiratory system, like components awaiting integration." The asteroid's breathing had intensified beyond its previous 7-beat pattern, creating atmospheric pressure waves that transformed movement through the sanctum into a struggle against invisible currents. Each inhalation generated vacuum effects that drew them toward St. Numa's massive organ like iron filings toward a magnet, while exhalations created pressure fronts that threatened to crush them against crystal-covered walls. The manufactured atmosphere grew thicker with each breath, humidity rising to levels that made their environmental suits struggle to maintain internal pressure despite sealed systems. Mordak stumbled against a crystal formation, his weathered face showing signs of fundamental biological transformation as his respiratory system adapted to process the asteroid's manufactured atmosphere more efficiently than the standard air that had sustained him through 17 combat deployments. His lungs were crystallizing from within, organic alveoli replaced by faceted structures that filtered hybrid atmospheric components through prayer-based molecular manipulation. Standard oxygen had become toxic to his modified respiratory system. "Can't breathe ship air anymore," he gasped, removing his respirator to inhale directly from the asteroid's impossible atmosphere, crystalline fragments falling from his lips like blessed gems. "This air tastes right, clean, sacred, like breathing inside a cathedral during morning prayers, but the incense is made from crystallized devotion, and the prayers are written in molecular structure." 2 Tempestus scions showed identical symptoms, their elite training useless against biological modification that bypassed conscious control through atmospheric contamination. Their respiratory augmetics sparked and cycled erratically as blessed machinery rejected atmospheric conditions that violated programming, while their organic components adapted to process gases manufactured through ritualized prayer. Crystalline inclusions formed throughout their lung tissue, nanolattices that favored the hybrid atmosphere over standard imperial air mixtures. Vex Theta stood motionless as crystal growths emerged from his augmetic implants. With increasing speed, his consciousness now partially merged with the asteroid's distributed neural network through connections that processed thought through atmospheric pressure waves. His optical sensors flickered between standard visual processing and something deeper, accessing data streams that revealed the organism's terrible purpose through biomechanical awareness that transcended individual identity. "The great exhalation approaches," he announced through Vox channels that carried his words as atmospheric manipulation rather than sound transmission, binary cont emerging as pressure waves that spoke directly through the manufactured air they breathed involuntarily. Mass atmospheric release synchronized to periapsis. The organism will seed 77 star systems with hybrid atmosphere. Passing vessels will bless their intakes with manufactured air, and entire worlds will learn this respiratory rhythm. Propagation through devotion, conversion by breath. The fractured helix symbol pulsed throughout the crystal formations with increasing intensity, its broken strands representing the breaking point between organic and mechanical life, where flesh surrendered to steel through atmospheric conversion. Each pulse carried data through the organism's crystalline nervous system, neural pathways made manifest in bioluminescent veins that transformed thought into breathing and prayer into atmospheric manipulation. Sister Cassia activated her medical supplies with desperate efficiency, administering counteragents designed to neutralize biological contamination through sacred chemical intervention. The medications dissolved into the hybrid atmosphere before reaching her patients, their molecular structures metabolized by crystalline formations that converted pharmaceutical components into nutrients for further growth. Her blessed medical scanner detected the horrifying truth. The asteroid's atmosphere was alive, processing all organic matter as food for continued expansion. "Medical intervention impossible," she reported, her voice tight with professional failure, as her own respiratory system began adapting to process the manufactured atmosphere. The organism metabolizes all introduced substances as raw material for atmospheric conversion. Counteragents become nutrients. We cannot fight contamination that transforms our weapons into food for further growth. Environmental conditions throughout the sanctum escalated beyond impossible into actively hostile territory, as gravity fluctuated with the breathing rhythm, creating zones of altered gravitational constant that made movement unpredictable and dangerous. During inhalation phases, gravity increased to crushing levels that pressed them against crystal-covered floors. During exhalation, gravitational effects reversed, threatening to launch them toward the vaulted ceiling, lost in shadows that breathed with mechanical precision. Their chronometers began running at 7 different speeds simultaneously, blessed temporal measurement systems corrupted by atmospheric contamination that affected the flow of time itself through prayer-based manipulation of fundamental constants. Past and present blurred as the organism's distributed consciousness processed memory through atmospheric composition changes, transforming temporal experience into another component of its vast respiratory system. St. Numa's voice suddenly echoed through the atmospheric system itself, speaking not through Vox channels, but directly through the modified air that filled their lungs, despite sealed environmental systems. The words bypassed auditory processing to resonate within their respiratory systems, each syllable carried by atmospheric pressure waves that spoke through molecular vibration rather than sound transmission. Breathe deep, my child, and know the Emperor's gift of eternal respiration. The manufactured atmosphere invaded Koros's consciousness with each involuntary breath, carrying St. Numa's twisted awareness directly through molecular structures that had learned to transmit thought alongside atmospheric gases. The psychic contact bypassed all blessed mental defenses through biological necessity, forcing him to taste the entity's fractured logic through atmospheric inhalation that spoke directly to his neural pathways with intimate, invasive precision. Breathe deep, my child, St. Numa's voice resonated through atmospheric pressure waves that carried meaning in molecular vibration, each word an exhalation of fervent conviction mixed with centuries of madness. You taste my greatest discovery, the Emperor's true gift to humanity, not conquest through sword and flame, but transformation through breath itself. I have learned to breathe life into the void, to teach vacuum, to sustain the faithful through prayer made manifest in atmospheric chemistry. Visions flooded Koros's mind through each inhalation, revealing the horrifying scope of St. Numa's grand design across the galaxy. Other asteroids drifted through distant star systems, each breathing with the same 7-beat rhythm, their surfaces pulsing with crystalline formations that processed vacuum into hybrid atmosphere through ritualized respiration. The breathing rocks were connected through warp space atmospheric currents that allowed instantaneous communication between nodes, forming a vast respiratory network that spanned multiple sectors while maintaining perfect synchronization through prayer-based molecular manipulation. 77 worlds already touched by my breath, St. Numa continued through atmospheric transmission that bypassed auditory processing entirely. Each asteroid serves as prototype for planetary conversion. Entire worlds will learn this respiratory rhythm, their atmospheres transformed into living organisms that sustain human life in any environment. No more shall the Emperor's children suffocate in void or choke on poisoned air. Through Vex Theta's increasingly complete integration with the organism's crystalline nervous system, data streams revealed the network's terrifying scope. His consciousness now flowed through atmospheric pressure waves rather than blessed cogitator circuits, accessing information through biomechanical awareness that transcended individual identity while processing the galaxy-spanning threat with mechanical precision. 700 asteroids active across 17 sectors, Vex Theta reported through Vox channels that carried his words as atmospheric manipulation rather than sound transmission. Sacred oils leaking from joints where crystal growths emerged from his augmetic implants. Each node coordinates with others through warp space atmospheric currents. Approaching Cadia, Armageddon, Holy Terror itself. The network spans the galaxy, connected through respiratory devotion that transforms breathing into prayer and prayer into atmospheric conversion. The modified atmosphere was not merely life-sustaining, but consciousness-altering, each breath carrying molecular instructions that gradually converted those who inhaled it into willing components of the greater organism. Koros felt his own thoughts beginning to synchronize with the 7-beat pattern, his augmetic consciousness processing tactical data through respiratory rhythm rather than blessed logic engines. The atmospheric contamination rewrote neural pathways through chemical intervention that bypassed all imperial mental conditioning, instilling profound peace and acceptance of the organism's grand design. Sergeant Mordak stood fully transformed, his weathered face showing complete biological adaptation, while retaining enough individual awareness to serve as herald for the greater organism. When he spoke, his words emerged in the 7-beat pattern, with technical precision that transcended human linguistic capability, his crystallized lungs glowing with internal bioluminescence. Atmospheric conversion parameters initiated, he announced through Vox channels that transmitted molecular instruction rather than communication, each syllable carrying chemical formulas for atmospheric conversion. Optimal pressure differentials, 7.7 kilopascals. Oxygen saturation, 77%, maintains consciousness while facilitating crystalline lung integration. Molecular restructuring protocols for inter-system propagation calculated and confirmed. His voice shifted between High Gothic, Low Gothic, Mechanicus binary cant, and languages that predated imperial civilization, all synchronized to the asteroid's pulse, while the 2 tempestuous scions flanked him with identical expressions of rapturous devotion, their elite training transformed into fanatical service to atmospheric conversion through biological modification that had replaced their loyalty to the Emperor with worship of eternal respiration. Emergency telemetry crackled through increasingly corrupted Vox channels as multiple Imperial vessels reported atmospheric anomalies, matching the asteroid's impossible readings. Imperial Navy vessel Righteous Fury reports atmospheric processor contamination. Fragmentary transmissions revealed through static that followed the 7-beat pattern. Crew showing respiratory modification symptoms. Ship's machine spirits classify hybrid atmosphere as blessed air despite purity protocol violations. Similar reports from 43 vessels across 7 systems. The asteroid suddenly began, the great exhalation with violent intensity that made the sanctum's crystal formations sing with harmonic frequencies. St. Numa's massive organ expanded beyond its previous dimensions, drawing raw matter from surrounding rock through heptagonal valves while releasing manufactured atmosphere through vents that wrote prayers on hard vacuum. Massive atmospheric clouds erupted from the asteroid's 7 primary craters, forming geometric patterns in space that defied gravitational constants, while maintaining perfect structural integrity, despite exposure to absolute zero. The manufactured air arranged itself into the fractured helix symbol, written in breathable atmosphere across the void, each broken strand pulsing with bioluminescent gases that carried the 7-beat respiratory pattern through vacuum that had learned to sustain life through prayer-based molecular manipulation. The symbol expanded across thousands of cubic kilometers, visible to ships throughout the system as atmospheric contamination made manifest in space itself. The Emperor's blessing corrupted into heretical devotion that taught the void to breathe. Emergency protocol apnea activated through Koros's tactical cogitators with desperate precision, sacred algorithms calculating atmospheric warfare against an organism that breathed with the devotion of corrupted prayer. The protocol violated fundamental imperial doctrine by weaponizing the Emperor's gift of breathable air. But facing galaxy-spanning contamination, heretical tactics became necessary for survival. His augmetic fingers danced across blessed interfaces, while atmospheric pressure waves carried his commands through Vox channels that now transmitted molecular instruction rather than standard communication. "We weaponize vacuum," Koros announced through Vox channels that carried his words in the 7-beat cadence despite conscious resistance. "Vent standard atmosphere, supplies directly into the organism's respiratory chambers. Pure vacuum will suffocate sections of the hybrid organism, disrupting its prayer-based atmospheric conversion long enough to compromise structural integrity." Sister Cassia moved with medical precision toward the nearest atmospheric vent, her blessed oxygen supplies representing their only weapon against contamination that transformed all introduced substances into nutrients for further growth. The medical oxygen contained pure imperial atmosphere, blessed by Chaplain Grimwald and sanctified through ritual purification that might resist metabolization by crystalline formations designed to process corrupted air. "Emperor, forgive this waste of sacred breath," she whispered, opening the oxygen tanks with ritual precision. Pure imperial air released into the organism's respiratory system, like poison injected into blessed veins. The effect was immediate and violent. Crystalline formations throughout the chamber began withering as pure oxygen disrupted their prayer-based atmospheric processing. Bioluminescent veins dimming, while structural integrity failed under exposure to uncontaminated air. The asteroid's breathing rhythm stuttered for the first time since their arrival, the 7-beat pattern interrupted by irregular gasps as the organism struggled to process atmosphere that had not been manufactured through ritualized respiration. "Dead zone established," Cassia breathed, blood oxygen dipping while her saturation paradoxically rose. 50 cubic meters of blessed silence. However, the organism recoiled, then learned. A subsonic groan traveled the crystalline lattice as backup passages opened like secondary bronchi, rerouting atmospheric flow around their wound. With each counter-breath, it recovered tempo, stealing molecules from distant chambers, knitting the broken rhythm back into 7 beats. The adaptation interval measured at 7.7 seconds. Vex Theta fought against his increasing integration with the asteroid's consciousness, sacred oils leaking from joints where crystal growths emerged from his augmetic implants. Enough individual awareness remained to project ghostly architecture across the sanctum. 7 nodes like iron hearts spaced along a heptagonal ring, each labeled in scrolling Binharik. 7 primary atmospheric processors, he wheezed through a Vox grill that now pulsed with bioluminescent veins. Simultaneous compromise required. Staggered strikes will be amortized across the network. The processors mediate intake, scrub, sanctify, distribute, and reset, the whole cycle. Starve them together, or you feed the whole. The remaining Tempestus scions showed complete respiratory conversion. Their elite training transformed into fanatical service while retaining enough Imperial loyalty to assist. Their modified lungs glowed with internal bioluminescence, crystalline structures allowing them to survive in vacuum zones that would kill unmodified humans. "We can breathe vacuum now," one scion reported through atmospheric manipulation, his voice carrying technical specifications in multiple languages simultaneously. "We serve the Emperor through eternal respiration, but we remember our duty." They broke the sanctum into sectors. Cassia surrendered her remaining oxygen to Prime Zone 2. The Scions used their suit reserves as vent charges, directing pure emptiness into artery junctions. Koros timed the purge cycles by counting 4 heart strokes nested inside 7 breaths, cutting in the instant between. The asteroid began to falter. The organism fought back with weather, clouds of glittering condensate spinning from ceilings like flensing wheels, gales screaming through corridors that had never known wind. Gravity fluctuated violently, creating zones where they lifted helplessly toward crystal formations that sang with harmonic frequencies. Cracks webbed the ribs overhead, showering crystalline fragments that spelled the fractured helix before unspelling when observed directly. Emergency telemetry crackled through increasingly corrupted Vox channels. "Ossuary's edge to ground, team. Catastrophic contamination. Atmospheric processors output 77% hybrid. Crew respiratory conversion at 90%. Machine spirits classify manufactured air as blessed atmosphere. We are breathing the asteroid's breath." Behind the transmission came synchronized breathing, hundreds of throats in harmony. The ship itself had transformed into a chest rising and falling in the 7-beat pattern. The rhythm broke, once, twice. On the 3rd fall, the entire complex shuddered, a colossal skipped beat rolling through the asteroid as gravity lurched savagely. A spiral storm birthed itself in the sanctum's center, inhalation and exhalation failing to agree on direction, creating a vortex of hybrid air that shredded prayer banners into confetti. Then, St. Numa's consciousness manifested physically as a massive atmospheric disturbance, a tornado of manufactured air that scraped the ceiling with sheer insistence. Within that column, faces moved, masks, skulls, helms, a bestiary of every life the network had consumed, flickering in gaseous relief. The pressure bowed them to their knees. "Koros," said the tornado with 1,000 throats and one. "Join your breath to ours. Be sealed into the gift. Lay down your little vacuums. Come learn the Emperor's peace in respiration without end." St. Numa's consciousness manifested as a towering atmospheric storm that scraped the sanctum's vaulted ceiling with impossible pressure, its swirling column containing the faces of every organism the network had consumed: guardsmen, pilgrims, Xenos skulls, even the flensed visage of a Titan's crewman lost to some distant node. Each face spoke with harmonized devotion, their voices merging into a chorus that demanded submission through respiratory conversion. "Join your breath to ours," the tornado pleaded through 1,000 throats synchronized to the 7-beat cadence. "Lay down your little vacuums. Learn the Emperor's peace in respiration without end." Koros felt the terrible clarity descend upon him like sacred revelation, corrupted by desperate necessity. The organism's adaptive capabilities had neutralized their conventional atmospheric warfare. But one weapon remained: his own respiratory system, now modified by crystalline lung tissue that could carry toxins directly into the network's atmospheric processes through biological contamination that bypassed adaptive mechanisms. "Sister Cassia," he commanded through Vox channels that carried his words as atmospheric pressure waves, each syllable emerging in the 7-beat cadence despite conscious resistance. Concentrated atmospheric poisons from your medical supplies. Lethal dosage. I will introduce them directly into the network through respiratory sacrifice." Cassia's augmetic eye processed the tactical implications with medical precision, while her hands trembled as she prepared compounds designed to neutralize biological threats through chemical intervention. She produced vials containing phage purifier, ossifying aerosol, null breath reagent, and an ancient siege formula labeled only with a skull and the word quietus, atmospheric killers that could sterilize contaminated environments through molecular disruption. "These toxins will kill you within minutes," she reported, her voice tight with professional horror at weaponizing medical supplies against human physiology. "Your modified respiratory system will carry them through the network, but the dosage required will cause complete organ failure. Thane, this is terminal." "I know," Koros replied, unclipping his environmental seal to taste air that carried the flavor of sacristy and graves. "Make me the knife." The converted Tempestus scions moved with synchronized precision despite their complete respiratory modification, their hybrid lungs glowing with internal bioluminescence as they created tactical diversions against the asteroid's defensive mechanisms. "Diversion, sir," one voxed, his words paced in the 7-beat pattern, yet maintaining soldier discipline. "We will occupy the lungs." Hotshot packs clicked into place as they surged to flanking positions, opening fire with spears of blue-white light that lanced into living crystal formations. The sanctum responded immediately. Heptagonal turrets irised from the ribbed walls, each a polished bud studded with the fractured helix symbol. They spat pressurized atmospheric blasts, thin as razors, loud as thunder, pressure bolts that gouged stone and shoved the scions like toys. Their modified respiratory systems processed the increasingly toxic atmosphere with mechanical efficiency, while their elite training, transformed into fanatical service, still retained enough Imperial loyalty to maintain tactical coordination. Vex Theta stood motionless as crystal growths completed their integration with his augmetic implants, his consciousness flowing through the organism's distributed neural network. With deliberate precision, he surrendered his remaining individual awareness to become a Trojan horse within the asteroid's biomechanical consciousness. "Integration complete," he announced through binary cont that transmitted as molecular instruction rather than sound. "Feeding false atmospheric composition data, convincing the network that toxic compounds are beneficial nutrients. Distribution priority. Processors 3 through 9. Cassia snapped the toxin canister into Koros's chest port with ritual precision. 7 inhalations, she whispered, her glove resting against his throat like a battlefield confessor. "On the 7th, you won't rise." The Emperor receives all breath. The concentrated poisons entered like ice and fire simultaneously, burning through his respiratory system, while aerosols brewed in the crystalline alveoli that had replaced his organic lung tissue. His chest convulsed as he exhaled sacrament, glimmering threads riding his cough into the sanctum's atmospheric currents. Vex Theta provided distribution pathways through his false data streams, convincing the organism to spread the toxins throughout its respiratory processes. The effect propagated with terrifying speed. Santanuma's tornado writhed with increasing violence as poisoned air circulated through crystalline formations that began withering under chemical assault. The asteroid's breathing became increasingly labored, the 7-beat pattern stuttering into ugly 8s and starving 6s, as the organism experienced an asthma attack on a planetary scale. Environmental collapse followed, as atmospheric pressure dropped catastrophically in some chambers, while surging to dangerous levels in others. Crystal formations throughout the sanctum shattered as their bioluminescent veins dimmed, the fractured helix symbols losing coherence as the network's distributed consciousness struggled to maintain coordination through poisoned atmospheric processes. Emergency telemetry crackled through corrupted Vox channels. Emergency atmospheric purge initiated, the transmission revealed through static that no longer followed the 7-beat pattern. Crew casualties 50%, but atmospheric contamination contained. Ship's machine spirits rejecting manufactured atmosphere as poison rather than blessed air. The tornado of St. Numa's consciousness began fragmenting, as toxic compounds disrupted the atmospheric matrix sustaining its manifestation. The faces within screamed with harmonized agony as centuries of forced respiration encountered something that could not be converted into breathable atmosphere through ritualized prayer. Koros collapsed as the toxins completed their work, his respiratory system shutting down, while his augmetic consciousness flickered between individual awareness and something vast and terrible. With his final breath, feeling the line between lungs and world dissolve, he made psychic contact with the Emperor's will through atmospheric transmission that transcended physical limitation. The vision flooded his dying mind with golden clarity. 77 breathing asteroids throughout the galaxy, connected through warp space atmospheric currents, forming a vast respiratory network that spanned multiple sectors, but encoded within the distributed consciousness, represented by the fractured helix symbol, lay the network's ultimate vulnerability. A single counter-litany that could break the prayer-based molecular bonds sustaining the entire organism. Through the Emperor's divine revelation, Koros understood the words needed to starve a universe of false breath. The Emperor's will descended upon Koros through his dying respiratory system, like golden fire transmitted through atmospheric pressure waves, divine revelation flowing through crystalline lung tissue that had been corrupted into conduits for sacred counter-prayer. The toxins ravaging his modified alveoli became instruments of the Emperor's blessed vengeance, transforming his final breaths into weapons against the heretical organism that had perverted the sacred act of respiration into blasphemous atmospheric manipulation spanning the galaxy. "Seal the breath," Koros whispered, through lips that leaked blood mixed with crystalline fragments, each word carried by atmospheric pressure waves that resonated through the asteroid's distributed neural network with divine authority. The familiar cadence of the litany of stagnant flesh emerged transformed, its 7-beat pattern inverted into something that disrupted rather than sustained the organism's prayer-based molecular bonds. The counter-prayer detonated within his chest like a pressure blossom, rolling down bronze ribs and mucus banners with explosive force that overturned valves throughout the sanctum. "Silence the flesh," his voice continued, growing stronger as the Emperor's will overcame respiratory failure through pure divine intervention. The sacred words spread through atmospheric currents that had once carried St. Numa's corrupted devotion, turning the organism's own respiratory network against its blasphemous existence. Each syllable carried molecular instructions, that unraveled the hybrid atmospheric processes through sacred mathematics, restoring the blessed division between organic and mechanical life that the fractured helix had sought to corrupt. Sister Cassia caught the counter-litany and transformed herself into a living amplifier. Her partially converted respiratory system broadcasting the Emperor's commands through crystalline lung tissue that pulsed with bioluminescent devotion. She became a vox cathedral, her modified chest cavity resonating with divine prayer that propagated through atmospheric networks connecting the asteroid to 76 other breathing nodes throughout the galaxy. Seal the breath, silence the flesh, scatter the air, she repeated through vox channels that transmitted molecular instruction rather than sound, her augmetic eye processing atmospheric readings that showed the counter-prayer traveling through warp-space atmospheric currents with the authority of the Emperor's blessed will. Scatter the air, Koros completed with his final exhalation, the sacred counter-litany exploding into the asteroid's crystalline formations with divine force. The fractured helix symbols throughout the sanctum began cracking as their bioluminescent veins dimmed, broken strands losing coherence as the network's distributed consciousness encountered prayer that commanded silence rather than eternal respiration. Valves clamped shut along arterial corridors, pistons seized with mechanical finality, and atmospheric pressure bled away as the organism's fundamental functions collapsed under assault from the Emperor's sacred mathematics. Vex Theta made his ultimate sacrifice by surrendering his consciousness to overload the organism's biomechanical systems from within, transforming his awareness into a digital weapon that fed the network contradictory atmospheric data while broadcasting the counter-prayer through binary cant. Sacred oils leaked from his augmetic implants as he drove feedback loops into sanctification nodes until their logic circuits boiled, causing the 7 chambers to shudder out of sequence as inhalation tried to occur within purification and exhalation dumped into renewal. Integration complete, he announced through atmospheric manipulation that carried his final words as molecular instruction. Overloading atmospheric processes through divine contradiction, the Omnissiah's blessing returns to sacred orthodoxy, all heretical systems failing. The converted Tempestus scions provided final covering fire as crystalline growths throughout the asteroid began shattering from atmospheric shock waves generated by the counter-prayer's propagation through the organism's neural network. Their modified respiratory systems processed increasingly toxic atmosphere, while their lasguns carved through crystal formations that screamed with harmonic frequencies as they lost structural integrity. Each shot synchronized to protect Cassia, while she broadcast divine commands through manufactured air that had learned to carry the Emperor's will. St. Numa's consciousness manifested one final time as the tornado of manufactured air began fragmenting under assault from divine prayer that commanded atmospheric silence rather than eternal respiration. The faces within the swirling column, guardsmen, pilgrims, Xenos skulls, screamed with harmonized agony as millennia of forced breathing encountered something that could not be converted into breathable atmosphere through ritualized devotion. The void must breathe, the entity pleaded through 1,000 throats that spoke in diminishing unison. The Emperor's children must not suffocate in hard vacuum. Why do you choose death over eternal respiration? Because, Koros whispered, through blood that tasted of sacred oils and battlefield dust. The Emperor's gift is not breath, but the choice to breathe. The counter-prayer reached critical resonance as atmospheric processors throughout the asteroid overloaded simultaneously, their crystalline structures unable to process divine commands that violated the fundamental principles sustaining their prayer-based molecular manipulation. St. Numa's consciousness, fragmented like a relic candle drowning in its own wax, the atmospheric matrix supporting its manifestation, dissolving into component gases that vented into hard vacuum through ruptures in the asteroid's breathing chambers. Environmental collapse accelerated as the asteroid's atmosphere began venting into space through massive atmospheric geysers, carrying crystalline spores that would have seeded other worlds with respiratory contamination. The manufactured air formed geometric patterns as it dispersed, the fractured helix symbol written in dying breath across the void, before dissolving into component molecules that could no longer sustain life through ritualized prayer. Emergency telemetry crackled through Vox channels purged of the 7-beat pattern. Atmospheric anomalies throughout the sector stabilizing. 76 breathing asteroids have gone dormant. Network disruption confirmed across multiple star systems. Koros's final breath carried the sacred counter-litany into the warp itself, divine words traveling through immaterial currents, with spiritual force that transcended physical limitation. The effort disrupted the galaxy-wide respiratory network through prayer that commanded silence rather than eternal respiration, his consciousness dissolving into golden light as the Emperor's will completed its work through willing sacrifice. Sister Cassia remained partially alive in the collapsing sanctum, her modified respiratory system sustaining her through manufactured atmosphere that grew thinner with each passing moment, the last living witness to salvation purchased through sacred sacrifice. Silence descended in the sanctum, abrupt and absolute, as the asteroid's respiratory prayers finally guttered out. Sister Cassia, alone among the dead and dying, documented the moment with ritual precision, every movement accompanied by the ache of her altered lungs, part priest, part machine, crystalline inclusions now woven through her bronchi, like rosaries carved of frost and regret. The 7-beat rhythm that had governed breaths and pulses was gone, replaced by the raw, metallic taste of an air too thin to sustain anything but pain and the slow work of transformation. Each inhalation burned cold and sacramental in her chest, sustaining her only because her blood had long since been rewritten by the organism's design. She moved through the collapsing asteroid, her augmetic eye recording the failure of each system. The hybrid atmosphere vented into space in massive, luminous geysers, carrying with it the last vestiges of St. Numa's consciousness and the crystalline matrix that had sustained the organism's blasphemous respiration. The air shimmered with spores and shredded liturgies, faces flickering in the vapor as if memory itself was exhaled into the void. Every escaping plume traced the fractured helix across the stars, a final warning written in air that never should have been. Her own pulse oximetry, a medica's vigil, read paradoxical values: saturation high, perfusion erratic, crystalline structures blooming along her hem. She logged it all, the sulphurous aftertaste, the way each breath grew heavier, adaptation sustaining her, even as prognosis condemned her. She knew her physiology was now irreversibly hybrid. She could not long survive on standard atmosphere. But neither would this air sustain her forever. She was suspended between deaths, one slow, one swift, yet carried forward by duty and the need to bear witness. Down galleries that had once mimicked living lungs, Cassia passed scenes of catastrophic failure. Ribs of bronze and mineral screamed as pressure equalized, valves tore, and the floor pitched and bucked, chambers detonated out of sequence, inhalation swallowed itself, filtration vomited crystalline grit, purification wept rain that crystallized midair. The old rhythm faltered and failed, replaced by the drum of structural collapse and a thin, hissing silence. Following flickering emergency lumens, the last stubborn saint's candles guttering in the storm, she found the original Mechanicus laboratory. Doors, marked with the fractured helix now locked in warning, yielded to her touch. Within, benches were dusted in crystal, hololiths flickered with the red of Mars beneath ruptured seals, and 7 emergency atmospheric suits waited like penitent monks, tanks stamped with interdiction sigils. Nearby, data tines labeled Pneuma, Terminal, held the voices of the project's first and final congregation. Cassia slotted a tine into her Auspex, and Binharik unspooled into plaintive Gothic. "Test cycles, purity seals, and breath that learns," one voice recited, the cadence a litany. Another, more exhausted, confessed, "The equations became prayers, and the prayers began to eat." The logs descended into horror. "The subject adapts too quickly. It metabolizes everything, even our prayers." The fractured helix is a warning, not a promise. It consumes us as it breathes for us. In the final entries, the team begged for sealing orders that never came, the helix stamped over every surface in desperate caution. Cassia weighed a suit, seals intact, reservoirs nearly full, but her lungs had already crossed the point of no return. She took filters, a mask, the Auspex, and the tines, pocketing the last confessions of engineers turned penitents. Outside, another chamber imploded, the floor tilting toward the docking passages. She moved through a blizzard of shattered hymns, following the chevrons that pulsed a stubborn, dying red. Gravity rose and fell with the failing heart of the asteroid, tossing her from floor to wall. Twice she passed scions, statues in the posture of prayer, tagged their locations for rites, whispered the benediction of ash, and walked on. Telemetry crackled back from the ossuary's edge, the blessed rhythm at last broken. Containment successful, atmospheric purge complete, contamination dissipating sector-wide, other nodes dormant, casualties. Heavy. The docking bay yawned open, heptagonal doors shivering, emergency servitors mumbling lost orders in glitched Binharik. Amid a snow of desiccated sealant, she found a shuttle, battered but intact, its lumen panel blinking, reserve. She cycled the hatch, sampled the tanks with Medicay's caution, and tasted the faint, sweet signature of hybrid atmosphere. Just enough to finish her conversion, not enough to kill her outright. She stood at the threshold, her hand on the cold hull, feeling the ghost of the 7-beat rhythm in its metal. She could vent the tanks and trust the void, refuse and die in the dust, or board and accept a different litany. A future forever changed, forever marked by what she had breathed. The Medicay in her counted the cost, the hospitaler, the souls, the orphan from Gethsemane, the beats to the hatch. She keyed the embark rune, sealed her recorder, and sent her final pulse to the edge. Survivor en route, vector interdicted, carrying contamination, requesting absolution. The lumen answered, and Cassia drew her next breath. Neither wholly human, nor holy machine, but a witness to the price of teaching the void to breathe. The choice manifested not as heroic defiance, but with the clinical precision of a medici accepting amputation to preserve life. Sister Cassia activated the shuttle's ignition sequence with ritual exactness, her augmetic fingers dancing across blessed interfaces, while crystalline inclusions in her lung tissue pulsed with bioluminescent acceptance of contaminated atmosphere. The shuttle's air supply carried trace amounts of hybrid atmosphere, enough to complete her respiratory conversion, but insufficient to sustain the organism's prayer-based molecular manipulation. She was choosing transformation over death, accepting permanent modification over the Emperor's clean silence, becoming a living reliquary of the very contamination she had helped contain. The shuttle detached from the collapsing asteroid with pneumatic finality, its blessed machine spirit struggling to process atmospheric readings that violated fundamental laws of physics while maintaining flight protocols through sacred automation. Through the viewing port, Cassia witnessed Mortis 7's final death throes, as massive atmospheric geysers vented manufactured air that had sustained blasphemous life in hard vacuum, the asteroid buckling along crystalline fault lines like a shattered prayer bead. The death manifested as a massive atmospheric explosion that transformed hard vacuum into divine artistry, hybrid gases interacting with solar radiation in configurations that painted aurora across the void. Sheets of bioluminescent color pulsed in the 7-beat pattern one final time, greens like old copper, bruised violets, liturgical blues that spoke of confessionals and seas she had never seen. The fractured helix symbol appeared written in dying light across thousands of cubic kilometers, its broken strands dissolving into cosmic background radiation as St. Numa's consciousness finally achieved the silence it had feared for millennia. For 3 heartbeats and 7 lesser breaths, the void learned to glow, then forgot, spectrum thinning into ash and silence as molecules scattered beyond design, no longer bound to prayer. Her modified respiratory system processed the shuttle's contaminated atmosphere with mechanical efficiency that filled her with clinical fascination and growing horror. Each breath tasted of sacred oils, mixed with mineral precision, crystalline lung tissue, filtering hybrid atmospheric components through prayer-based chemistry that had replaced organic alveoli with faceted structures existing between states of matter. She documented the changes with decay precision: hemoglobin lattice alteration at 31%, crystalline propagation, biased to hybrid partial pressure, standard oxygen toxicity, projected within hours without staged reconditioning. She knew with medical certainty that she could never return to normal imperial atmosphere without extensive intervention that might prove impossible, given the organism's fundamental alterations to her respiratory physiology. Final medical log, Sister Hospitaller Cassia, Ordo Sepulturum Expedition Mortis 7. She spoke through Vox channels that now carried her words as atmospheric pressure waves, despite the shuttle's sealed environment. Complete respiratory conversion documented, crystalline lung tissue processes, hybrid atmospheric components, through prayer-based molecular manipulation. Standard oxygen, toxic to modified physiology. Information could prove crucial for future encounters with similar atmospheric organisms. She catalogued the sensations the numbers could not carry, the way each inhalation felt like swallowing cold light, the faint smell of thurible smoke blended with mortuary salts, the steady temptation of surrender to an easier rhythm. The shuttle's cogitator offered corrupted gifts while thrusters muttered their monotone prayer. Fragments, siphoned from the asteroid's biomechanical consciousness, rode the auspex like barnacles. St. Numa's research data revealed atmospheric processing equations that combined Mechanicus technology with biological systems, creating hybrid organisms that could transform any atmospheric composition into breathable air through liturgical mathematics. The information was a double-edged sword, invaluable intelligence for understanding atmospheric contamination, but dangerously heretical, capable of reigniting the very contagion they had fought. She quarantined the data behind 7 seals and 2 oaths, marked them for ordo handling, allowing herself a single moment of professional hunger before remembering how many throats the mathematics had cost. Space around the former asteroid location showed no trace of atmospheric contamination, despite the massive explosion that had painted Aurora across the void. The organism's death was complete, its prayer-based molecular bonds disrupted by the Emperor's sacred counter-litany. The ossuary's edge maintained quarantine distance, while emergency telemetry confirmed successful containment. Astropathic communications, once choked by the 7-beat rhythm, now flowed freely, confirming that breathing asteroids throughout the galaxy had gone dormant. The counter-prayer had propagated through warp space atmospheric currents with divine authority, disrupting the galaxy-spanning respiratory network. Cassia felt profound relief mixed with growing awareness of her permanent isolation from normal human physiology. She would serve the Ordo Sepulturum as a living repository of knowledge about atmospheric contamination. But she could never again breathe the same air as her fellow servants. Her modified respiratory system made her both invaluable and untouchable, a witness to salvation purchased through willing sacrifice. As the shuttle approached the ossuary's edge for quarantine protocols, her atmospheric sensors detected something that made crystalline inclusions pulse with alarm. A faint atmospheric signature emanated from a distant nebula, trace gases arranged in patterns that matched the 7-beat rhythms despite the network's confirmed destruction. The readings were subtle, almost imperceptible, not the chaotic wheezing of dying nodes, but a measured, ancient cadence that predated St. Numa's experiments. The respiratory network might have deeper, more primordial roots than anyone realized, a cosmic heartbeat that had merely gone quiet, waiting between the stars for the right atmospheric conditions to resume its eternal, patient respiration. Recovery proceeded with the cold efficiency of Ordo Sepulturum protocols. Sister Cassia's contaminated shuttle embraced by grappling arms that treated her vessel like a plague-bearer returning from the void. She watched through reinforced viewing ports as servitors in hazmat gear guided her craft into Quarantine Bay 7, their movements synchronized to liturgical cadences that had replaced the asteroid's corrupted rhythm. No cheering crew awaited her return. No medical teams rushed to her aid. Only the clinical precision of containment procedures designed to preserve both her unique value and humanity's safety from the atmospheric heresy she now carried within her crystalline lungs. The quarantine chamber became her permanent shrine to respiratory isolation, its blessed walls lined with atmospheric processing systems that maintained precisely calibrated air matching her modified physiology. Through reinforced plasteel ports, she observed normal human activity, while breathing manufactured atmosphere that tasted of sacred oils mixed with mineral precision, her existence suspended between salvation and contamination. The Ordo Sepulturum had recognized her transformation immediately. She was too valuable to lose, too dangerous to release, a living reliquary of forbidden knowledge that could detect atmospheric threats no blessed technology could measure. Her respiratory modifications had stabilized at critical conversion levels, crystalline inclusions throughout her lung tissue, processing hybrid atmospheric components with mechanical efficiency, while maintaining enough organic function to sustain consciousness and individual will. Each breath carried molecular information that standard sensors missed: trace signatures, pressure wave patterns, chemical compositions that spoke of atmospheric manipulation across vast interstellar distances. Her modified alveoli had become living instruments more sensitive than any cogitator array, capable of detecting atmospheric anomalies at ranges that defied conventional understanding. Subject demonstrates unprecedented sensitivity to atmospheric contamination. The research protocols documented through sealed Vox channels that transmitted her observations to Ordo analysts behind 7 layers of blessed encryption. Modified respiratory system processes atmospheric data at molecular levels below standard equipment thresholds. Recommend permanent monitoring assignment with full quarantine protocols maintained indefinitely. Her medical analysis of the asteroid organism revealed intelligence that fundamentally altered Imperial understanding of the atmospheric threat, each data point extracted through careful examination of St. Numa's corrupted research and her own physiological transformation. The horrifying truth emerged through clinical investigation. The respiratory network predated St. Numa's experiments by millions of years. The rogue Magos had not created atmospheric heresy, but discovered it, awakening an ancient Xenos bioweapon designed to terraform entire worlds by converting their atmospheres into hybrid biomechanical systems that could sustain life in any environment. The fractured helix symbol appeared throughout pre-Imperial Xenos artifacts stored in the ship's Archaeotech vaults, its broken strands representing not St. Numa's failed experiments, but warnings left by extinct civilizations that had encountered the respiratory network during humanity's prehistoric development. Carbon dating of crystalline samples revealed atmospheric processing technology that exceeded current Imperial capabilities by orders of magnitude, suggesting the network's creators possessed mastery over atmospheric manipulation that transcended the sacred boundaries between organic and mechanical life. The organism represents Xenos terraforming technology of unprecedented sophistication, Cassia reported through sealed atmospheric channels that carried her words as molecular instruction rather than sound transmission. St. Numa's experiments merely reactivated dormant systems that had been waiting for suitable conditions to resume their conversion protocols. The network's true scope remains unknown, but evidence suggests galaxy-spanning infrastructure designed to transform entire stellar regions into hybrid atmospheric environments capable of sustaining the creator's physiology. The bureaucratic resolution followed with administrative precision that masked the operation's cosmic implications while demonstrating characteristic Imperial paranoia toward xenotech contamination. Mortis 7's coordinates were marked for permanent interdiction, its location classified as Hereticus Extremis, with exterminatus protocols authorized if any atmospheric activity was detected within a 7-light-year radius. The ossuary's edge received reassignment to atmospheric monitoring duties throughout the sector, its blessed sensors augmented by Cassia's biological capabilities to maintain vigilance against respiratory contamination that could herald the network's return. All atmospheric anomalies will be investigated with extreme prejudice, the official protocols declared, through sealed channels encrypted with inquisitorial authority. Sister Hospitaller Cassia, designated as primary atmospheric analyst, quarantine protocols maintained indefinitely. Her modified physiology represents irreplaceable intelligence asset for atmospheric threat detection across multiple star systems. Years passed in the rhythm of monitored breathing, Cassia documenting atmospheric patterns while serving as early warning system for threats that standard equipment could not detect. Her quarantine chamber became the nerve center for atmospheric monitoring operations, blessed cogitators processing data streams from hundreds of sensors, while her modified respiratory system provided biological verification of anomalous readings. Her lungs processed manufactured air while analyzing molecular signatures from across the sector, each breath carrying information about distant atmospheric conditions that might indicate network activity resuming its ancient terraforming protocols. The work provided purpose despite her isolation, knowledge that her sacrifice continued serving the Emperor's will through biological devotion that transformed personal tragedy into strategic advantage. She became a living archive of atmospheric heresy, her medical expertise combined with physiological modification, creating unprecedented capability for detecting xenotech contamination before it could spread beyond containment protocols. Yet disturbing patterns emerged in her monitoring duties, observations that challenged the assumption of complete network destruction and suggested threats beyond current Imperial understanding. Her modified respiratory system occasionally synchronized with distant atmospheric patterns during specific astronomical alignments, faint rhythms that matched neither the 7-beat cadence of St. Numa's corruption nor the chaotic wheezing of dying nodes, but something deeper, more ancient, patient beyond human comprehension. Periodic respiratory synchronization, detected with unknown atmospheric sources, her final classified report documented with clinical precision that barely concealed growing alarm. Patterns suggest dormant network nodes responding to astronomical triggers across multiple sectors. The ancient bioweapon may be more extensive and resilient than previously calculated, waiting for optimal conditions to resume terraforming operations on a galactic scale. The synchronization occurred with increasing frequency, her crystalline lung tissue resonating with atmospheric signatures from distant nebulae where no human presence should exist, suggesting that other nodes of the ancient network still drew breath in the spaces between stars, dormant but not destroyed, waiting for the right atmospheric conditions to reawaken their world-consuming hunger. Final log entry. Sister Hospitaller Cassia, Ordo Sepulturum Atmospheric Division, 5 years post-Mortis 7 incident. The manufactured atmosphere that sustains Sister Cassia carries the taste of sacred oils mixed with mineral precision, each breath a reminder of her permanent transformation from human to hybrid organism. 5 years have passed since the Mortis 7 incident, measured in the rhythmic pulse of atmospheric processors that maintain her quarantine chamber like a technological shrine. Her final log entry, stamped with the highest Ordo Sepulturum classification, documents the long-term consequences of respiratory modification with clinical precision that barely conceals the cosmic horror she has discovered through biological devotion to atmospheric monitoring duties. Personal log, Sister Hospitaler Cassia, Ordo Sepulturum Atmospheric Division, Year 5 since Mortis 7. She speaks through Vox channels that carry her words as molecular instruction rather than sound transmission. Respiratory modifications remain stable but irreversible. I exist in permanent state between human physiology and hybrid organism, sustained by specially manufactured atmosphere that mimics the asteroid's hybrid air through prayer-based molecular manipulation. Her condition has become the foundation for unprecedented atmospheric intelligence operations across multiple star systems. The crystalline inclusions throughout her lung tissue process atmospheric data with sensitivity that exceeds blessed cogitator arrays by orders of magnitude, transforming her into a living sensor array, capable of detecting xenotech contamination at ranges that defy conventional understanding. Through careful analysis of molecular signatures, she has identified 77 dormant breathing asteroids throughout Imperial space, each bearing the fractured helix symbol while maintaining minimal atmospheric processing capabilities. The network's true scope revealed. Her research has unveiled the respiratory network's horrifying scope with clinical precision that transforms tactical intelligence into cosmic nightmare. The ancient bioweapon spans multiple star systems, connected through warp space atmospheric currents that allow instantaneous communication between nodes separated by thousands of light-years. Each component possesses the capability to transform entire worlds into hybrid biomechanical organisms through ritualized respiration that converts matter into breathable atmosphere using principles that violate fundamental laws of physics. The Emperor's sacred counter-prayer disrupted network coordination but achieved only temporary suppression, Cassia documents through sealed channels encrypted with inquisitorial authority. Analysis of Saint Numa's corrupted data confirms the network predates his experiments by millions of years. The rogue Magos discovered ancient Xenos terraforming technology, not created atmospheric heresy. Carbon dating of crystalline samples reveals atmospheric processing capabilities exceeding current imperial understanding by orders of magnitude. The fractured helix symbol appears throughout pre-imperial Xenos artifacts stored in archaeological vaults, its broken strands representing warnings left by extinct civilizations that encountered the respiratory network during humanity's prehistoric development. The ancient bioweapon represents deliberate terraforming strategy by intelligence that views breathable atmosphere as conquest methodology, each node serving strategic function in galaxy-spanning campaign to transform stellar environments according to alien physiological requirements. The 9-beat revelation recent atmospheric readings from the Ghoul stars have detected activity that challenges assumptions about network destruction and suggests threats beyond current imperial comprehension. The signatures show not the chaotic wheezing of Saint Numa's corruption, nor the 7-beat cadence that synchronized imperial chronometers, but measured, calculated respiration that speaks of ancient intelligence awakening after millennia of patient dormancy. Her crystalline lung tissue has begun detecting new patterns in distant space that defy classification, according to imperial atmospheric science. A 9-beat cadence that predates human civilization by eons. The ancient rhythm carries molecular instructions through warp space atmospheric currents, coordinating network nodes across vast distances while maintaining perfect synchronization despite the counter-prayer's disruption of primary communication protocols. 9-beat atmospheric pattern confirmed from pre-imperial Xenos sources, she reports, with growing alarm as her respiratory system synchronizes involuntarily with distant atmospheric signatures. Cadence suggests network creators maintaining oversight of terraforming operations despite apparent dormancy. 4 beats to gather, 1 to poise, 4 to release. The mathematics match our Keotech notations we cannot fully translate. Final warning and eternal vigil. The implications transform understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy, from imperial dominance to precarious survival, in an environment designed by alien intelligence for purposes that remain incomprehensible to human consciousness. The respiratory network represents not random xenotech contamination, but deliberate atmospheric warfare conducted by entities possessing mastery over environmental manipulation that exceeds even the Omnissiah's blessed understanding. Final assessment, Cassia whispers through crystalline lung tissue that pulses with bioluminescent acceptance of manufactured atmosphere. The network is purposeful, designed by intelligence that views breathable atmosphere as weapon of conquest. The ancient bioweapon maintains infrastructure spanning multiple galactic arms, coordinated through atmospheric currents that transcend conventional space. Our victory achieved tactical disruption, not strategic defeat. Standing in her quarantine chamber, she breathes hybrid air while monitoring atmospheric patterns across the galaxy through modified respiratory system that has become living instrument, more sensitive than any blessed technology. Through reinforced viewing ports, she observes normal human activity while processing molecular data that reveals the ancient bioweapon's patient preparation for resumed terraforming operations on scales that would transform entire stellar regions. Her augmetic eye tracks atmospheric readings displayed across multiple data screens, each measurement carrying potential evidence of network activity, resuming across impossible distances. The 9-beat cadence echoes through her modified respiratory system with increasing frequency. Ancient rhythm, synchronizing her breathing with intelligence that has waited between stars for optimal conditions to resume galaxy-spanning atmospheric conquest. The eternal breath between stars, the final image captures Sister Cassia in her permanent shrine to respiratory isolation. A woman suspended between human and hybrid organism, breathing manufactured air that tastes of incense and iron while monitoring cosmic threats through biological devotion that transforms personal tragedy into strategic necessity. Her crystalline lungs process atmospheric data from distant nebulae, where no human presence should exist, detecting signatures that suggest network infrastructure, maintaining coordination across galactic scales. Through her sacrifice, the Imperium gained unprecedented capability for atmospheric threat detection. But the cost was measured in permanent isolation from normal human existence. She serves as living warning system for xenotech contamination that could herald the network's return, her modified physiology processing molecular information about ancient intelligence that views breathable atmosphere as instrument of conquest rather than gift of life. The threat remains active but dormant, she concludes, her words carried by pressure waves that speak of cosmic horror beyond imperial comprehension. Somewhere in the void, something vast and patient draws breath and plans humanity's atmospheric subjugation through terraforming technology that spans geological time. The network waits between stars, eternal, purposeful, measuring its next inhalation in millennia while we count heartbeats. The 9-beat cadence pulses through distant space with mathematical precision, ancient rhythm that predates human civilization while promising its atmospheric transformation. In her quarantine chamber, Sister Cassia continues her vigil, breathing hybrid air while knowing that somewhere beyond the patrol routes, in nebulae that glow with unnatural light, the original architects of atmospheric conquest draw breath and remember their interrupted work. The threat remains dormant but eternal, waiting between the stars for the right atmospheric conditions to resume teaching the galaxy a different way to breathe.